Hello and welcome to the Employee Advocacy and Influence Podcast. My name is Lewis Gray and I'm a Senior Marketing Manager here at DSMN8. And I'm joined today by a very special guest who has actually joined us for an episode in the past. So I'll hand over to the man himself to let him introduce himself.
Thank you, Lewis, and hello, everyone. My name's Elliot. I've actually been with DSMN8 as a business since the very early days when we were a small sort of 5-man startup. I've been with the business over 6 years and previously ran our customer success team with that. And part of that was launching hundreds of employee advocacy programs across all sorts of different businesses. I now sit in a product specialist and sales enablement role, but here to be able to talk to everybody about everything and anything employee advocacy.
You mentioned about when you joined, it was a six-person business at the time. Which employee number were you? Were you number 4, 5, 6?
I think I was employee 5, give or take, if that including the founders, which I don't know if you're supposed to include them or not, but including the founders, employee 5.
If not, you get to bump yourself up. You're number 3.
Yeah, true. I get to go up to 3, which is pretty good going.
Awesome. Well, for everybody listening, it made perfect sense for all of us here to get Elliot on the podcast today to talk about this particular topic. So we're going to be talking about the various different ways to keep your employees engaged with your employee advocacy program. So obviously, this isn't something that you can just set and forget. It's something that needs constant nurturing and you need to keep people excited about it. So with Elliot's experience, like he said, with being the former director of customer success, he just comes with a wealth of knowledge. And if anybody's seen examples of employee disengagement and great examples of methods to engage employees or re-engage, let's say, dormant advocates, then it's Elliot. So basically what we've done today is we've both brought 2 different ways that we've seen work well in the past when organizations are attempting to either re-engage their dormant advocates or just to keep their existing employee advocates engaged with their platform and program. But the caveat is we don't actually know what either of us has brought to the table. So, Elliot, I'm hoping you've brought a few reserves with you.
I've got one or two in mind on back burner if we need them.
Okay. Well, if we've got any that are the same, I feel like I'm going to be in a pickle because I'm pretty sure you've got much more experience to call on than I have.
We'll be fine.
But brilliant. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. Okay, so kicking it off, I'm going to, Elliot, put the ball in your court. Like I said, I've got a couple here, but if this is one that I've already got documented, then I can just scribble this one out and call on one of my reserves. But it's over to you, first and foremost. Elliot, what is one way that you've seen as a successful tactic to keep employees engaged with the program?
So I think this is something of an overlooked one, more than it is the most successful way, but I think it's such an obvious one that people do miss out, which is just collecting ad hoc feedback. So many people start an advocacy program and often really get going with it, really get a lot of users, a lot of employees engaged with what it is that they're doing and what they're trying to achieve. But it starts to become more of a top-down initiative and something that people control more than it is something for the employees to really kind of be able to develop their own personal brands with. So, and I really mean this from a perspective of people managing the content. So as a company gets bigger, as an advocacy program gets bigger, what you can often see is suddenly the HR team are involved and they say, actually, we'd really want to push all of these new job ads that we're pushing, or a different marketing team gets involved and says, we really want to push our new product launch and can we make sure everybody shares that? Which is great. And it's exactly what advocacy is there for. But often people just forget to ask their employees what they want to share. And this is really different depending on the industry that people are in and depending on the business as well, to be perfectly honest. But gathering that feedback from employees about what content they would like to see, what content they would like to share, what they find interesting is really, really going to drive engagement. And if you just force people down a particular road and say, actually, this is the content that we want you to share, and this is the content that's going to be made available for you to share, that can eventually just start to put people off. And, to use kind of crass examples almost, but if I'm in a management consultant business and I deal particularly in aviation, as an example, I just deal with airlines and planes. If all the content that's being pushed is not relevant to me, then I'm just going to disengage and I'm going to start doing it elsewhere, or I'm going to do it in my own time or in my own way. And that means that I've become a disengaged user, particularly if you're using tech and particularly if you're using a platform like DSMN8. That's a disengaged user because they're doing something elsewhere. So adding things like polls is something, a real classic that we see. You can create a little poll to see what kind of content somebody might like to see. A lot of our clients also send surveys out to their users. That's a really great way to do this because you can just say, here's quite a big survey. It can be 10 questions, it can be 50 questions, depending on what you'd like to do. And it just really helps gather a lot more haptic feedback. It means you can understand what people like, what people don't like, why they're disengaging, why they're engaging, and really kind of start to tailor things from there. And I think that for me is just one of the most obvious things to be able to do that just gives you so much more information about your advocacy program than even looking at analytics and looking at data. Just get some feedback, ask people a question.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you know what? I'm actually really glad you've mentioned this one specifically because you'll know this as a participant in DSMN8's very own employee advocacy program. But it's something that I've tried to implement, and we've sent surveys out a couple of years, or for a couple of years now. And the feedback that we got, even though we're compared to some organizations, a relatively small company, and I can reach out to people individually, the feedback that I got was game changing the first time, because the first year we sent it out, and this was a couple of years back now, it was very much centered around the tone of voice in the captions that we were providing people to use for their social media posts. So actually, Elliot, I'd like to use you as an example here. I'm very fond of emojis. I know from conversations with yourself that you're less fond of emojis. So if I provide you with something that's littered with smiley faces, pointing fingers, and God knows whatever else, I have to assume you'd be less inclined to share it, and rightly so. But if you've just got those marketing blinkers on and you just assume that your way is best because you think that emojis are more engaging, essentially you're alienating those employees because you're making them feel like, one, maybe they don't feel they have to share it, but they feel like they don't have another option. It's that or nothing, unless you're going to be asking them to write their own captions, which of course is time taxing.
Yeah, and it is exactly that. It's just, you're trying to do this for people's personal brands. You're not always trying to push the kind of company agenda. And I think the more you push exclusively the company agenda, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't push product announcements and all of the good stuff that everybody wants to get out there, more than anything, you just want to be able to make sure that employees feel like that this is beneficial to them and not just beneficial to the company. I think some of our clients, and another way that this is done, if you don't want to run a survey and you don't want to kind of send polls out, which, some people do that in a bit more of a rigid manner, but I've also seen ambassador councils be created. A subset of your employee advocates become a small sort of council and a small group that meet monthly, meet quarterly, meet even just annually, and just gather that feedback from them in person, across a Zoom call, across a lunch and learn, whatever it might be. There's just lots of really, really easy ways to kind of gather that information. One of our clients even does a reading group where I think it's about 7 or 8 people come together each month and bring a few articles, a few pieces of content that they've read, and then they sit and discuss them and say, actually, this would be really valuable for the advocacy program because of X, Y, and Z. So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of gather this information. It doesn't have to be a big rigorous poll that you put out and you really kind of extrapolate data. You can just sit at lunch and talk to a few people about how it's going and what they'd like to see. You get that info and you can act on it really quickly. And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, to pull on another, it's a DSMN8 example, but just from personal experience, I had a similar situation. So it was a conversation I had with Emma, one of the customer success managers at DSMN8. We were talking about the way in which we provided content to employees. So we shifted our strategy a while back to something that we call content drops. So rather than dropping content into the platform or providing employees with content, I meant to say, every day or so, or every other day, or whenever it might be, we just decided we're going to do it all on one day so that people knew when to check in on the platform. They knew when there was going to be new content, and in our mind, that would work. And initially it went quite well because there was this big buzz around this idea of the content drops. It's like, okay, there's new content to go and share. I'll go schedule my posts. But then this conversation with Emma made me rethink, because she basically mentioned that it gave her less reason to then log into the platform every day and to engage with the program, because she knew there wasn't going to be new content. She'd seen it all. So if, for example, you're utilizing any internal communications, or Elliot, like you mentioned, if you're running polls, if you have a platform that allows you to do that, however you're doing it, you're giving people less reason to come back by doing it that way. And this just came from a conversation in the office with one employee. And then lo and behold, I speak to other people. It's like, hey, how do you feel about this? And Elliot, I spoke to you and you were just like, yeah, of course. I don't know why we ever did that. And I was just like, right, okay, this makes sense now. Fortunately, we didn't try it for too long. We definitely didn't try to push it after that, but it was like a 3-month run that came to a swift end. But I'll hold my hands up and say we tried something, it didn't work, but through speaking to employees and asking for feedback, we found out.
Yeah. And interestingly, you found out something that affects people's engagement as well, which is a sort of double whammy.
Absolutely right. Okay, so the first one that came to mind, and this came to mind because it's one that so many organizations overlook when they're running a program, and this is going to sound glaringly obvious. I feel like especially to you, Elliot, but it's saying thank you. So just showing a bit of appreciation, showing a bit of recognition, but just going out of your way to acknowledge that your colleagues are doing something for you. Although, yes, it will benefit them personally to be more active on social media. Obviously, the reason that you started a program was most likely to achieve or to help you achieve some sort of company goal. And obviously, providing your employees with content to share when they go and share that, they're doing something to help you achieve that goal. So just as a way to try and maintain engagement and to keep employees excited about it, and just as I would say it's almost as an employer branding exercise, just go out of your way to acknowledge employees. And this doesn't have to be a scheduled thing. There doesn't have to be a routine to this. It's just, if you see somebody posting something to their LinkedIn and that that's something that's been provided to them and they've gone out of their way to share it, like that piece of content, drop a comment. If you see that it's got lots of interactions on it, maybe loads of reactions on LinkedIn or comments, then just let them know. Just be like, hey, I saw this post. It looks like it's doing really well. Keep it up. Obviously, the tone of voice will vary depending on who you're speaking to. But it really is such an obvious one. And I'd call back to the analogy that Bradley used on the podcast a while back, where he said about if somebody opens a door for you, you don't have to say thank you. But if you don't say thank you, it's like, somebody's gone out of their way to do something. It can just be a bit irritating because it's like, I was kind of doing you a favor here. Just think of it like that. Obviously, if you've sold employees on the idea of participating, then they will be participating to grow their personal brands and to become thought leaders. But at the end of the day, they're still doing something that ultimately benefits the company. So let them know that you appreciate it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a really good point, but it's such a simple thing to do. And that's the thing that always I find about kind of saying thank you and just highlighting the fact that people are doing something that's beyond their job description. We look at advocacy from a wealth of different ways. Sales teams, there's a huge vested interest in them using it. Marketing teams as well. Obviously, they're always going to use it, but particularly once you step outside of those bounds in different departments in businesses, different people, they are doing something that isn't necessarily part of their job description, part of their standard day. So they're going above and beyond typically at that point. Yes, it's sharing something to LinkedIn. It's not a huge ask. They're not running marathons at that point, but it's a really, really nice thing just to say thank you, like the kind of holding the door open. But no matter what you're using as well, it's simple to do. There's very easy ways to get this done, even at a rapid rate. If you're using tech like our platform, you'll be able to just pull up everything that you need, and you'll be able to go through and you'll be able to go and like all of the LinkedIn shares that you want to go and like. It's really, really simple. If you're not using tech, use things like hashtags. It's a really good one. You can search hashtags on LinkedIn, on X, on basically every social network. So if you've got a fixed hashtag that you're using, or you're pushing a campaign that has a hashtag, go search for it. Go see all the employees that have shared it. Go like and engage with all of those pieces of content. It's really like 15 minutes of your day, and you could just really kind of encourage people to do this so much more just by the fact that they've been noticed that they were doing it. It's just that visibility for a lot of people.
Yeah, of course. And again, just to, I guess, highlight a few more ways of doing it. Just to call on a real world example. There's a case study that I'm working on at the moment. So I can't name the client just yet. But hopefully by the time this episode comes out, we can drop the link in the show notes. But if not, the point remains the same. But they were basically sending out a ad hoc email when they'd noticed a few employee posts had performed particularly well on LinkedIn. So they basically they had a spreadsheet, and they put all of these posts into a spreadsheet. And once they had, I think it was between 3 and 5, but enough to kind of put almost like an email blast together. They just took their list of employee advocates, and it was in the hundreds, but they took that list and just sent almost like a newsletter out to these advocates to say, hey, firstly, it was thank you. There was a big banner at the top that said thank you for your participation. We wanted to give a special shout out to these 3 or 5, however many employees who have driven some seriously incredible results. But it wasn't just focused on those 3 in particular. It was very much thank you all for participating. But I just thought that was a really lovely way of just saying, hey, we see you. Thank you to everybody. And here's what's possible. So it's kind of showing others maybe who aren't generating quite as much engagement. It's like, hey, look what's happening. This is the content we're providing. These are the results people are generating.
Yeah, the recognition just goes such a long way. It's just such an easy thing to do that just encourages people all the time. So one more kind of big item that I think goes heavily overlooked when you're trying to engage employees in an advocacy program is executive sponsorship and executive engagement. I think when you look at an advocacy program, and everybody knows this, your senior leadership team are often going to be some of the most impactful advocates that you have for the advocacy program itself and the output of it, how much engagement we're getting, how many clicks, and so on and so forth. But actually, the really big knock-on effect of executive sponsorship and your senior leaders being involved is they lead by example, and it encourages all the other employees to follow suit and also to be involved in it. So when you see the CEO of your business using your advocacy program, if you're using a piece of tech, or just generally being more active on social, it's a really, really big kind of flag to everybody else that, hey, this is something that we should and can be doing on a regular basis. So engaging that senior leadership team is a very quick way to start to engage the rest of the business at a very, very rapid rate, because it's just a call sign to be able to do that. Now, this has its own complications, I think, and Lewis, you probably have experienced this in some formats, but engaging senior leaders, C-suite, can be tricky. They are notoriously a tough part of a business to crack when it comes to getting them onto social media. Making sure that they can remember their LinkedIn password can sometimes be a challenge in itself. But then, really beyond that, actually getting them engaging on a regular basis. The one trick I've used time and time again with senior leadership teams, and if you're an advocacy manager, if you're running a program internally in a business, I'd really encourage you to look into this and how you can do it. But your senior leadership team are competitive by nature. Put them in some kind of a leaderboard. Put them in some kind of ranking. Put them in some kind of list where they can see how they compare to everybody else. Most people in a C-suite are there because they are quite competitive. They are quite driven people. And if you can highlight the people that are doing it really well and really efficiently, and the people that perhaps aren't, it is a very, very quick way to engage senior leadership. And in doing that, and doing that with an email blast, doing that in a Slack channel, depending on the size of your business, obviously not everybody has the access all the time, it will make a huge, huge difference to how quickly they engage in the platform but then how quickly the rest of their teams start to engage as well. And that's kind of my step 2 almost, is if you can get to that senior leadership group and you can get them engaged, then start to rank how are their business unit doing, how their department, whoever it is, if it's your CMO and your CEO and your head of sales that you want to compare against one another, show them how the sales team is comparing against the marketing team. Make their tribes kind of compete with one another, essentially. And if you can do that, you get that full lead by example, but you also get the real top-down initiative on top of all of this as well, because nobody wants their team to be the one that's at the bottom of a leaderboard or bottom of a ranking. They want to be the ones that are at the top. They want to be the ones leading. They want to be the ones winning. And it's can be a tricky thing, and it doesn't happen overnight typically. But if you can engage that senior leadership team, it will have a huge knock-on effect for the overall engagement of your platform. Ultimately, if your CEO, if your C-suite aren't interested in advocacy, should your employees be interested in it? You need that executive sponsorship to really make this go at a rapid rate.
Yeah, I'm genuinely so glad you mentioned this one, because this was one of my reserves, and I was just going to throw it in as like a 6th one as a bonus if this didn't come up, because you're right. I think we've seen it have an adverse effect as well, where Elliot, I feel like you can probably speak more on this in terms of real world client examples, but just instances where companies have done a really great job, or program managers, I should say, of getting their C-suite on board, which then in turn creates the effect that you've just described, where their teams or their tribes, as you mentioned, follow suit, but then the senior leaders start to drop off and they stop using the platform for whatever reason. Like you said, they are notoriously difficult to get on board, but it's just as important that you keep them engaged as it is every other employee, if not more so, because the knock-on effect it has if they are using your platform or participating in your program, or if they're just posting on social media, is enormous. And if you've done a job of getting them on board and then they drop off, then it kind of signals to the rest of the organization that this was once important, because we heard lots about it, we got loads of emails about it, our VP was involved, and now they're not using it anymore. So do we really need to? And it kind of gives them a fallback as well. If you try to communicate with them about why they need to, get back on social and to keep that momentum, it's like, oh, but so-and-so isn't doing it. I don't know, it kind of takes the spotlight off them and it just puts it glaringly on said senior leader who is no longer participating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's why I've always been really fond of that kind of ranking system. If you can get people into some kind of email chain, some kind of group, some kind of Slack channel, there's so much more accountability against one another because of that. Whereas if you have one senior leader engaged and they drop off, but there's no other senior leaders involved, when a tree falls in the woods, is anybody there to hear it sort of situation, nothing really happens. Whereas if you've got 5 of them and they can all point and say, this is the person that's falling behind, it's really, really obvious. And that drives so much of this engagement. And it's the same with everything in every business, really, at the end of the day. If other people are accountable for it and they're all doing it at the same time, then others will be involved.
I mean, something I'd be curious to know is, and this is kind of a point within a point and could potentially be an episode within an episode, but have you seen any great examples of program managers doing something to keep senior leaders engaged? Or if I rephrase it, what would your advice be to a program manager to continue to communicate the value to their senior leaders? And is there like a high level tactic where it's like, no, you need to, bring out the big guns because you've got the big guns participating?
I think it depends on the senior leader that you're talking to. And again, without going completely down the rabbit hole, understand what drives that senior leader. Is it your CFO that you're trying to get engaged? If it is, look at your analytics, look at your ROI that you're calculating off the back of this, look at the money that you've saved on ad spend, translate it to them via that. Is it your sales team? Is it the head of sales? If you're trying to communicate to them, look at the traffic, look at the leads that you've generated, highlight the fact that their team generated a wealth of leads off the back of this when they were using it. And since it has dropped off, and really just highlight the cause and effect, essentially. And if you can do that, depending on the person's department, you're really going to speak volumes more to that person's just general disposition and what they're interested in. If you just say the overall engagement in our advocacy program has gone down, then the thought process might be, well, maybe just the sentiment towards this has gone down. People are less interested in it. Maybe we should deprioritize it even further. Whereas actually, if you can say, look, this was working really well when you were engaged in this and your sales team were engaged in it and you were getting a lot of leads off the back of it, that's what's going to drive that conversation to go, I'd like to get back to that point where we were getting lots of leads off the back of this. And it's a very long answer to a question that I could probably talk about for another hour, to be perfectly honest. But really just focus on the thing that people care about. And that's the simple thing to do with senior leaders. Senior leaders care about the overall health of the business, but they care about their department and the thing that they're responsible for, much like you're responsible for the podcast and other things. They're the things that you truly care about. They're the things that are close to you. So that's what matters.
Yeah, a brilliant answer, mate. There's so much that I want to unpack there, but I think how you've summarized it is really what I wanted to get onto, which is something we speak about all the time on this podcast, whether you're trying to onboard new advocates or engage existing ones, is to speak to their objectives, speak to their pain points, always consider who you're speaking to. It's no different to with your marketing, considering your ICP. Just treat your employees or your colleagues in exactly the same way. You need to make this appealing to them and to understand how this is going to help them. And the same goes for your senior leadership team. I would just on that note, we'll drop a link to this in the show notes, but we did produce an episode quite a while back on how to identify your ideal advocate profiles. And there's a section in there as well, which was really great, mostly delivered by Bradley, just talking about how to approach each of them and how to kind of understand their objectives and pain points. Okay, so my second, but the fourth tactic that I wanted to discuss is gamification. So, Elliot, you've already loosely touched on this because we spoke about leaderboards, but I would say that gamification is kind of open to interpretation in that there are so many ways that you can leverage gamification within your employee advocacy program. So we spoke about leaderboards, but one that I would like to, one to add to that is rewards themselves. So whether that's something tangible, it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be something along the lines of, an early finish or something along those lines. But just as a reward for top performers within the platform. So again, to encourage this competitive nature, this friendly competitive nature, obviously, but just for there to be something at the end of whether it's a quarter, at the end of the year, perhaps monthly. Obviously, it will vary from organization to organization, but we've really seen, especially when it comes to re-engaging dormant advocates, that just putting these rewards up for grabs can just spark that interest and a bit of internal buzz as well. So if you want those conversations to be happening offline as well as online between your colleagues, if you want them talking about the program itself, honestly, the most I've seen is from companies implementing leaderboards for the reasons, Elliot, that you mentioned, and then the rewards being up for grabs as well, because then there's really something on the line. But I know, obviously, you will have seen countless examples of organizations using gamification to varying degrees, whether it's leaderboards or rewards. So, it'd just be great to get your take on it.
Yeah, I've seen all sorts of rewards, and I've got lots of stories around rewards, to be honest with you. I think you touched on the most important element of gamifying, and particularly when it comes to prizes and physical rewards or something kind of tangible or intangible that you're giving away, is you want to make a lot of noise with it in the business, particularly in regards to what we're talking about, which is engaging users or re-engaging users. Making a splash in a business with some prizes is a very, very quick way to do it. And the reason I say that is you've always got a range of people that are going to be involved in your advocacy program. And some of those people, and it's completely natural at every business, might be quite apathetic towards it. They're not really sure if it helps them. They're not really sure if it's a bad thing. They're just not particularly sure. So If those people haven't kind of signed up to your advocacy program, haven't engaged like you want them to, it's often because they're just not really sure, they haven't tried it, and that's where they're at the moment in their journey. If you involve some rewards, and to make it simple, let's say you're giving away a pair of AirPods for the person that generates the most engagement over the course of a quarter. Now, when you do that, you're going to send some communications out. You're going to send a big email blast. You're going to potentially put that up in the office somewhere or something along those lines. That makes a lot of noise. And all of those people that are apathetic and unsure suddenly will become quite sure. And I can assure you of that, because what they'll do is, hey, I wasn't sure about this, but there's a chance I could win a pair of AirPods just by engaging and just by sharing some pieces of content onto LinkedIn. Let me give it a go. And it ties all the way back to what we were kind of talking about at the beginning, but that helps them start that journey and kind of start to build a habit of actually using the platform. That's what we're trying to get out of it. I think something that can be easy to fall into, and I would always kind of add as a part of caution, is you don't necessarily want to use rewards every single week, every single month. You're not trying to pay your advocates for sharing content. That's not the purpose behind this. What we want to do is just add a nice prize, add a nice kind of extra cherry on top thank you for being involved in it. And in doing that, that's what's going to engage your employees. If you do it monthly and it's a small prize and it's not particularly notable and doesn't make a splash, that's not going to engage your employees quite as much. Whereas if you can say, hey, we're going to bucket all of that up into a quarterly prize or a yearly prize, that's a bit more budget, first and foremost, so you can get a bit more bang for your buck and there's something exciting to talk about. But also that's the thing that incentivizes people to use it, not, oh, it's another month of the reward running. But I've seen rewards used in all sorts of ways. And I think, you touched on a day off and an afternoon off or an early finish, or I've also seen lunch with a senior partner or lunch with a C-suite member being kind of offered. They don't have to always be kind of these physical goods or monetary value prizes that come with it. There's loads of ways to just engage those employees with prizes, but again, the goal is we're trying to engage employees with these prizes. We're not just trying to pay for advocacy.
Yeah, and I've seen in the past where organizations have put rewards up for grabs, or even just from implementing leaderboards. Obviously, like we discussed earlier in the episode, it's a program manager's job to provide employees with content to share. So that could be pre-written social media posts, which is 95% of the time. Sometimes it's just an image or whatever it might be, and then you can kind of have free reign over the post. But 9 times out of 10, it's going to be pre-written captions. But the way that we've seen this work to actually improve the results of a program beyond just getting, dormant advocates engaged or just engaging existing ones is they'll actually see comments, clicks, and reactions all skyrocket as well, because the second there's something up for grabs, all of a sudden the employees who didn't have time to add a personal touch to a social media post or to write a caption themselves, and the ones who might opt for the pre-written ones, which is still good, but ultimately nobody knows their audience or your audience better than you do. So if you take the time to stop and write a caption and really think about what's going to resonate with your audience, then ultimately that's going to be better received. You'll then generate more clicks, comments, reactions. So taking a step back, the program manager is then seeing, okay, employees are now engaged again, they're sharing more, they're, remaining engaged. But off the back of that, they're now taking more time to, customize their content because they really want to perform well now. They want to rank high in the leaderboard. They want to win this reward, whatever it might be. And as a result, we're seeing heaps more clicks, loads more website traffic off the back of it. It's a win-win.
Definitely. And it's that thing of the quality goes up, and that's what you want. You want people more engaged than they currently are. And if their engagement at the moment is, oh, there's something pre-provided, I just share that, life's easy. Suddenly there's a reward in play. I'm not going to use the pre-provided. I'm going to put my own point of view to get a lot more engagement. Great place to be. The one thing that is interesting, and I will always note around gamification, do consider who is available to win those prizes, particularly if you're using technology. We actually had to build a feature many, many years ago when we first launched gamification to make sure that you could exclude certain senior leaders. There is a an unnamed client I'm going to go with whose CEO and COO used to compete at a very, very distinct level against all of their employees and constantly be winning a £50 Amazon voucher. Ultimately, we had to quickly exclude them from those leaderboards to make sure that they weren't just winning the prizes. So just something of note for everyone, unless you are a CEO and you're listening to this and you think, actually, I want to win the Amazon voucher, not my employees, then go for it. But ultimately, something just to consider with those senior leadership that we were talking about, let them be involved. Don't let them always win the prizes.
I absolutely love that. That's the competitive nature that gets you to the top, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I'll tell you the client after this, but I won't do it publicly.
Okay, so as the episode title said, it was 5 things that we wanted to discuss today. Elliot brought 2, I brought 2, but there was one that we both agreed on that we really wanted to talk about. For fear of this sounding like a product announcement or some sort of ad, I will throw in a disclaimer and say that this is all hyper relevant to everything that we've just discussed. And really, this is going to tie a lot of these things together. So the 5th and final way that we wanted to mention to engage your employees or re-engage dormant advocates is with a newsletter functionality. So the reason I say this might come across a little bit like an ad is just because of the fact that we recently released a newsletter functionality within the DSMN8 platform that essentially allows you to email any list of advocates, specific advocates, groups, teams, your whole user base, whatever it might be. And there's various benefits to this, but again, we brought Elliot onto this episode to discuss this topic specifically. But also, Elliot, I know you are heavily involved in this idea and bringing this all together. So I'll hand over to you to go into the details, but I'm sure there's going to be things we can discuss here.
Yeah, definitely. I think the newsletter functionality, more than anything else, is probably one of the best ways that you can do all of the things that we've just spoken about. And some people will have email functionality, newsletter creators within their business already. Some people will have it as part of the technology stack that they have. Some people will have it as part of their advocacy program, particularly those that work with Disseminate. But ultimately, being able to create a newsletter, being able to create some sort of email blast that you can send to then all of the relevant people about everything that we've just discussed. So that might be sending a newsletter out to your senior leadership team to highlight which of them is doing the best over the course of a given quarter or a month or year. If you want to collect some haptic feedback, that information, those surveys, those polls, again, a newsletter, firing that out to your employee advocates is going to be a really, really effective way of managing that process. Then things like gamification, highlighting that gamification is available, that there's prizes on offer, that it's about to come to an end. These are all the sort of things that having that comms functionality within an advocacy program or within the business is really, really important. You want to make sure that you're not just sending a kind of plain text email to your advocates. You want to make it look as it should do, with a banner, with a big image, with some bright colors, with some buttons. Everything that you could ever really want in that is that newsletter functionality. And that's how you really want to be able to communicate to your advocates. Even that saying thank you, it's a very easy way to be able to do that. And with something like our functionality, you can create kind of dynamic lists and different things like that. So people that have just joined, you could send them an email to say, hey, thank you for joining the platform. We're really excited to have you. Here's some information. Or people that haven't engaged in 3 months or something along those lines in the platform, you can send an email out to all of those people and say, hey, we noticed you haven't used this. Would love for you to fill out this survey and engage and tell us, why perhaps you haven't used this in a while. So having all of those things, having all of that together in a single place that is then focused on your advocates and isn't some big email newsletter tool that you send to your 80,000 customers, just makes a big difference, makes it super easy to be able to do. So the best way to engage your employee advocates is by doing all the things that we've just said. Just do it in a succinct manner.
Yeah, just bundle it all together.
Yeah.
But there's also something to be said about, reaching people where they are on a daily basis. Yeah. So if you're struggling to bring people back into your, again, assuming you're using technology, but back into the platform or to re-engage with your program, wherever you might host this thing, just sending out an email that directly links back to that to encourage them to come back. But you're not doing that within the platform itself. You're doing that from within their inbox, which no doubt, 90% of people do. You're checking your emails first thing in the morning. It's just much more likely to be seen. I mean, this is the beauty of, integrations. We've spoken about Slack and Microsoft Teams integrations in the past and about firing notifications there. This works for exactly that reason, because you're meeting people where they are rather than trying to always bring them back to the platform. Obviously, that's the end goal. I mean, the thing that personally I've loved the most about this newsletter functionality is just the ability to add posts into that email that you'd like people to share. And then it's just like, it hits their inbox, they click a button, and then they're in the platform hitting the share button or just sharing from there. But it really is that. It's just meeting them where they are.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so that's it. That's the 5. That's our top 5 at least. I would say if you have taken value from this episode and you want to dig in a little bit more, maybe learn some other ways to keep your program exciting and to engage employees, I would highly recommend grabbing a copy of our CEO, Bradley Keenan's book. It's called Employee Advocacy 101 Cheat Codes. As the name suggests, it's just got 101 tips in there to optimize, help launch, onboard employees, reactivate employees, you name it. There's 101 tips in there that will set you up for success. You can grab a copy for free on the DSMN8's website, actually. So we'll leave that link in the show notes. It's available as an audio book, physical, whatever takes your fancy, whatever your preference is. You can get that. And we'll also just pop a link to a little bit more information on the newsletter functionality in the show notes as well. But for me, it's been an absolute game changer. And we'd love to hear your feedback on it. So thank you very much for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with Elliot once again. But yeah, we'll catch you then.